basic training and learned how to be a soldier and an engineer. And they sent me to Japan, where they taught me how to be to Korea as a combat medic. I spent nearly 10 home. I come back to Salina eventually, my hometown. And in 1962, I got the bright idea to become a police officer. So I applied for and was received, police office. I wanted to say about the police department and the sheriff's department. I know Chief Nelson. I have talked to him a lot about his duties and about his training, about his recruiting, and he has done a fine job, I think, in Salina, Kansas. And the fellow that took my Solden has also done a fine. I think there's a lot of problem going on in the world of law enforcement today. I watched the news tonight, this afternoon. The mayor of Seattle has decided she was wrong in keeping the law enforcement out of that area that is called CHOP now, where the people have barricaded off and so on. So she decided she was wrong. Please, and if you think they're going to be there without being paid, I just don't understand what the thinking is of that. We're going through a bad time. We aren't going through a bad time in Salina. I think we got good law enforcement here, and we're very fortunate to have it. It's well funded by the city and the county, and I think we do a good job. And Brad Platt told me that I wouldn't get any tickets if I talked to you tonight, and so I don't know. I know that it's tough, for sure you'll make it right.
Thank you, sir. For the next personnel that are coming up, please let's limit our comments to 2 to 3 minutes, because we may have multiple people that may have something they would like to say. Thank you.
Good evening. Hello? Yes. So my name is Reverend D. Williamson, and I have a couple questions I'd like to ask to the police department. One of the things I'm curious about is there extensive psychological testing as a part of the hiring practice before you hire police officers and before they do any training? Because we do that in the work that I do. We do the psychological tests on all of our potential clergy people, and so I want to know if you do that with the police before you hire them, to see if there's any red flags, yellow flags, purple flags, whatever.
The answer is yes, absolutely. That's part of the conditional offer is a psychological exam. That's what has to occur, and they have 3 options: either they're recommended, not recommended, or recommended with qualifications. And the short answer is yes, we absolutely do that.
And do you use an outside agency outside of Salina, or
yes,
trained psychological people who do the MMPA and all that?
Yes, ma'am. And I believe it's kids in Kansas City. Yes.
In Kansas City.
Yes.
Okay. Also, I would like to know, after an officer is involved in an aggressive situation, if they too are drug tested. They usually test those who have been arrested for drugs. Do they test the officers as well afterwards, after some aggressive situations? I mean,
well, if there's, I don't know if I understand that. They don't, everybody gets arrested isn't drug tested. That's not necessarily true. But if the officer is showing signs of impairment, or if it's an officer-involved shooting, I believe that's standard operating procedure. But, I mean, as far as if somebody's acting aggressive, do they do a drug test? Generally speaking, the answer is no.
So do you, what was the question? It has to do with that again. Just lost the question?
Well, that is a great question. Generally speaking, our policy states if they're displaying some signs of impairment, that's when we can require a drug test.
For the cop?
Yes, but generally speaking, just because they're involved in a use of force, we're not going to drug test each officer now.
So do you do a psychological testing after there has been an aggressive situation or a killing or something like that? They've been involved in a shooting, to reassess the psychological abilities of that cop?
After an officer-involved shooting, the answer is yes. But just being aggressive, as you described it, is kind of a relative term. So I would just say that as far
I'm
as
talking
they,
about any shooting,
Offensive
killing,
shooting.
I mean, killings happen here in Salina as well. There was one that happened last year, that was here, you know, were those officers put on leave? Were they psychologically tested? Are they back on the streets, deal with it when they've been deployed and there's firearms, shooting and everything? So I would just know.
yeah, for all those questions, the answer is yes. I mean, they are immediately placed on admin leave, administrative leave. The investigation is handled by an outside agency, normally the KBI, Kansas Bureau of Investigation. They're placed on admin leave for a period of time and before they are medically cleared to include psychological evaluation before they return to duty.
And how long is that time?
Well, it's different. I mean, a lot of it has to do with the KBI.
The officer will be gone.
No, I'm saying it has some input on it. I mean, they have to get the first interview out of the way first.
So then the city, you determine how long they'll be gone?
Well, how long they're gone, but they still have to go through the steps as far as being medically cleared to return.
And so the average away time is what?
I would say a week to 10 days.
A week to 10 days.
I'm just pulling that out, yes.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Just asking.
Sure.
I'm sure I'll have some more questions. I'll go sit back down and listen.
Bill Black, 815 Spruce Street, and in Salina. I think this is probably for Brad, but in a big picture way, we see a clear disparity between people of color who are incarcerated versus the population that they share. And so if there's, 5% or 7% African Americans, but there's 20 or 15% incarcerated, I guess my question is, how would you account for that, and do you think there's any kind of maybe a self-fulfilling prophecy in there? And I know you're not, it's kind of a sociological question, but I think it's a fair question, and I see it so consistently, it seems, across the nation, that I'd just like to know what your thoughts are, and actually any of you. And I'll get back.
I'll be glad to share that question. I would say, I mean, that is a very difficult question. I can say as far as your police officers, I don't know how to answer that as far as, we also don't convict people either. We arrest people, we don't convict them, we don't put them in prison. So much of that is out of our control. We don't even convict people, we arrest people. So a lot of that, if not all of it, is out of our control as far as whether or not they're convicted and or serve a prison sentence.
So my question pertains directly to the, okay, Marina Bachman, my question pertains directly to the 1033 program. I'm curious exactly who makes that purchase. Like, I know it's the police department, but who makes that swipe? Is it you? Is it a decision? Do you have to ask your board first? How does that go?
Well, again, let's see here. It's not a purchase. We're not purchasing anything. But with that said, if it's something we need, like if we think possibly there's something there that we need, just say but a replacement APC, we would go online to see if there's any APCs available, right?
We added the chief of police.
Sorry?
We added the chief
Yes.
of police. Okay.
Well, I mean, I would assume the SWAT commander, Captain Hollins, would inform me that we need this and this and this. And if the best way to acquire it at the least cost to the citizens, which is basically free, if we can obtain that from the 1033 program, we will apply to receive that, yes.
Right, so you apply for it, but you don't necessarily need like the city commissioner's approval to apply for military.
That is correct.
Surplus.
That is
As long as it's under a spending cap, as I'm aware, right?
As long as it's what?
It's as long as it's under like a certain amount of money, right? Do you need an approval to spend more than
I
$5,000?
do not, or that's a great question. What I would say is in 2007, that wasn't part of the equation. So we haven't acquired, other than very small things as I've been here, that we needed to consider that. I would get with my city manager, my boss, and determine whether or not that was needed.
Okay, but then so the storage of the armored vehicle and maintenance, that would come from your city budget, or?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
If it's helpful at all, of surplus property or donations is currently not viewed as a purchase that rises to a purchasing threshold that goes to the city commission.
You're referring to the people in their custody as scumbags. It's time to get rid of that officer because he likes his job too well, and he thinks it's his duty to eliminate police officers. Now I'm talking about
Hi, Ann Hoekstra, 2062 Raymond. I'm gonna just put this out there. Can you address the blue code of silence and how does that fit? Does that even fit in with the culture of the Salina Police Department? Because there are bad cops out there. Well, I know that you're supposed to report them. Are your ties to each other stronger than your ties?
Greatly over the past that possibly have occurred for years are now being recorded. So I mean, that's removing a big veil of that going on. I'm ashamed that that's occurred in the past, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's right. If there's such a thing as that, which I've already said there probably is, but I can tell you in my career, I've received 2 tickets, and I'm fine with that. I mean, I know it is what it is. You get a ticket, you pay for it. But it occurred, sure. I'm not going to say, I'm not going to deny that we will deal with it, up to and including termination.
My other question is, I know that, is your policy for looking at police departments, police who are coming from other departments moving to Salina, is it just as stringent, you know, when you're looking at them to hire? Because there are reports of people who do, you know, who have been reprimanded, who have done this and that, and they move, and they go to another place and they can do it again. There's not a systematic thing that says, do you have things in place to keep?
Not here, I can assure you, but I'm just saying, that is the first red flag you have when somebody, and then we pull their personnel.
My name is 3155 West Crawford. I'm retired now. I was formerly the Vice President of Facilities at Salina Regional Health Center. I think working to keep it, I'm hoping the citizens of Salina and the City Commission does not give any favorable consideration of defunding the Salina Police Department or the city manager. But beyond that, saying nationally, is irresponsible to the communities that are served. I'm glad to hear the 1033 program. I think it is an excellent program. I think a lot of the stuff you do get or can get out of there isn't good. I've been in the hospital business for many years, and we also had opportunities sometimes to get equipment that by the time it came to us, it was well past its use or serviceability or even technology that was appropriate. So I would say having that armored vehicle is one of the best things in Salina at this point in time, and I have, in my 44 years in the hospital, know that where time is used effectively and for the benefit of the citizens of Salina. So our future 1033 purchases, those can be made without any removal of that from those practices which they are intended to review. That may be happening. I think that would be easy enough to resolve. We'll check on the membership, but background of education they should perhaps have and pursue that if that's beneficial. I do want to say, as one of my responsibilities as Vice President of Facilities at Salina Regional Health Center before retirement was security, and I have been better in their response. And I think not only to Salina Regional Health Center, but so many businesses and places within the community when they were needed, when we needed those folks. And those situations could get well out of hand, and I never saw a police department or police officer respond inappropriately to those things. The consideration I've seen them given to people on the street is exemplary. Are there bad police officers? Yes. Has Salina had some over the 45 years I've lived in Salina? Probably has. But I think for the most part they're doing a good job, and I have seen many chiefs of police, and every one of them has made Salina a priority for getting the best service they can. So I would hope my remarks, and they are the last resource many times. If the police department can't handle it, it cannot be handled, and we can't call out the National, we can't defund them and call out the National Guard when things get a little bit tougher than some arm twisting might take. Thank you.
My name is Angela Bracallo. I'm a resident of Salina. I am very concerned about the state of the Saline County Law Enforcement Advisory Board. The board is made out to seem like a check on the police department's power, but in reality is nothing more than an organization that lets the police themselves with the illusion of accountability. Take, for example, the numerous conflicts of interest on this board. The fact that the chair of the advisory board is also on the Police Excellence Fund, an organization that raises private funds to donate to the police. A department's funders cannot be the same people that are supposed to hold them accountable. Or the fact one advisory board member also has a family member on the police force. What will happen when there is an issue presented to the board that concerns this family member? And since any policy changes advocated by this board will have an effect on this person's day-to-day life, can any decisions by this board member really be impartial? Whether or not this man was on the board before his family member was in the police department does not change the effect this has on decision-making. This is not an independent board. And it is also not a public board. With meetings being closed to the public and no mandated release of meeting minutes, which it may not be in the suggested code by the state to do that, would still be good to have that if it's truly going to hold people accountable. There's no way for any of us to know what is going on. And with new board members being chosen by the current pool of board members, there is no way to challenge a board member who is not fulfilling their responsibilities. Moreover, this law enforcement advisory board is toothless. There is no clear indication in the bylaws or police must give them access to any files pertaining to complaints or policies. On top of that, the board can only make non-enforceable recommendations that the police department can choose to accept or reject. We do not know what instances of abuse of power have occurred, nor the board's responses. We do not know if recommendations have been made and been rejected by the police department. We do know that the board has no real power to enforce its recommendations. And we do know that if the board is primarily or solely relying, it means that the city has decided that the police can police themselves and effectively only uses this board to deflect questions and concerns about policing. As a resident of Salina, it concerns me that a group of heavily armed individuals given qualified immunity can decide the fates of people in our community with no real checks and balances from us. If we are to rely on an advisory board to identify issues of racial profiling, bias, excessive force, and over-policing, they must be independent, accountable to the public, and be able to enforce their decisions. Because these are real people whose lives can be and are ruined or taken by the complete lack of any checks on the police department's power of action. You are denying these people justice. And moreover, I want to say that this board is a huge issue, but it is a Band-Aid on can eat. The police are a last resort, as was said in this forum. We should be funding our first resorts first. Thank you for your time.
Do we have anyone? Okay, come on, ma'am.
Can you hear me with this mask on? Okay, good. My name's Lene Meyer. I'm from Salina, and I absolutely was not going to speak today. It's not my favorite thing to do, but I got a phone call from one of the young folks in the activist group. Her name is Blaze, and she called me to respect and caring for others, and lots of wisdom, in my opinion. And I heard on the news tonight that the governor said by Friday we all have to be wearing masks when we're out in public. I think I heard that right. I want to thank the local brought up that wanted me to speak to because of my history, in my work history, working with the mental health and people with addiction issues. She sees the need for programming, for education, for support, long before people get to the point where they need or have addiction issues. And from what I understand, a lot of the people that are arrested for crimes committed their crimes when they've been under the influence of drugs or alcohol. So that becomes an issue for many. I'm just looking at a big picture in ways our community can address some of these issues. I know there are programs that are happening, but what educate people that struggle with problems. I think dysfunctional family issues, dysfunctional issues is a generational thing. And I think it's important that we all look in the mirror and take positive changes, and maybe providing opportunities for some community-wide programs that can help people better understand where they've been, or they need to be, where they have a mental breakdown, so they don't have to get into drugs and alcohol as a way to cope. So that's my only thought, and I don't have any how that can happen, but I think maybe some brainstorming by a lot of people can make that a maybe a possibility. And I really believe that as we find peace within ourselves, we begin to love ourselves, and then we can learn to love others. And as we do that, we all find joy. And I think Salina is a place that hopefully can be open to those peace, love, and joy. A lot of work, but it's possible. Thank you.
The number of arrests that are made in this community that result in demographics of Salina, 13.8% of the population are people of color. So I think one thing that would be worthwhile would be looking at those numbers and determining whether the proportion of arrests and the proportion of our community. The second thing I want to get at is a broader topic that has been brought up here. And that is, the distribution of wealth, or the distributions to different programs within the community. So I grew up in Central. ADHD wasn't diagnosed. The nuns just beat it out of you. If you were misbehaving, then the answer was to until the kids sat in their seat and behaved. These days, we've shifted away from that mode of, and instead of just automatically applying corporal punishment, diagnose problems that kids have that result in disruptive behavior and learning. Now, that's not to say we've taken away an accountability system altogether, but rather we've come up with solutions to help deal with the problem before it escalates into a more serious problem that requires the use of force. So I do think it's very within our interests as a community to, first of all, where do the discrepancies lie when it being making with what demographics and in those arrests? Why are they being made? And instead of simply automatically going to the solution of, we need to crack down from the top end, thank you very much for your time.
Mona Hargrave, 704 South 10th Street. I just feel really strongly that there needs to be some clarification of a term that I have heard used here a couple of times this evening. When we talk about defunding the police, a really unstable person that I was trying to help didn't get any help at all. And what I was told by the police officer, one of the police officers that showed up, was, hey, it's not against the law to be off your meds. I understand that's not your job, but we need to provide more monies to the agencies that can help with that sort of thing. And so I just want people to quit talking about defunding the police like it's a dirty four-letter word. You need to understand what it really means. It doesn't mean get rid of the police. I just think everybody needs to understand.
Do we have anyone else?
Brian Frazier of Salina. Events that happened here in Salina. Out of that number what percentage of, or what number of officers were involved in those incidences. And during those investigations of those instances, was there any disciplinary actions that were taken or needed to be taken for those officers, the number of officers that were involved in that? The other thing is, on several occasions, I've spoken about the number of officers of color within Salina, and that if I had any suggestions on recruiting officers of color, if I could bring those up. Apparently, the process that we have been using for the last 10, 20 years is not working. I know that there are other cities that are able to recruit officers of color, and at that time, I think we were down, the last time I spoke with the chief about this, I think we were down 8 or so officers. Now we're down to where we just need 1. So during that period of time, there has been some recruitment of officers. And what is causing us to not be able to retain or obtain officers of color? Lead officers here.
There, as far as the 167 instances of using force, I can't. What I can say is definitely each is reviewed all the way up to me. It starts with the sergeant, it works its way up. If there's video, which oftentimes there is video, video is a really good thing. I mean, folks think the police are scared of video. We're not, because video helps us a lot more than it finds us doing something wrong. I mean, we get so many allegations of something happening, and then you show the video and that didn't happen. So I'm 100% for body-worn video, for dash cam video. I can say that one thought that comes to mind is if we show an example, or an example is shown where we use excessive force, I mean, we deal with it appropriately, but I can't give you a blanket answer. Every single person that uses excessive force is fired. I mean, sometimes it's a matter of retraining, sometimes it's a matter of they need to be fired, but you have to look at their past history. One example I can think of where a person was disciplined that just came to mind was the use of our taser.
I think that the chief knows, and I think every police officer knows or should know that was on the force at the time, that I 100% all of them. I also appreciate the young people that have come out to voice concerns. I think we need to listen to them. They do their research, facts. I don't always do that, but they have. And so I appreciate you sitting up there and taking questions. I appreciate that. My questions, however, for the governing body, and I'll address them to come and ask about a comprehensive plan of racial profiling and bias-based comprehensive plan. And see one, still have not seen one. Does one exist? As you want to accomplish. I completely appreciate that we have a lot of policies in place, but we have also answered on numerous Attorney General questionnaires if we had a racial, and the answer has always been yes, and nobody seems to be able to find that. So I hope that we can get to a point where we can differentiate between and a plan. Is that police officers in the department to do a lot. We have policies in community development and economic development that are unsuccessful in vulnerable communities and people with lower incomes. We raise poverty rates, we raise crime rates, and we make the job of a police officer much more difficult. I would ask that one of the things that we achieve at is a comprehensive plan. Is a comprehensive plan to make policing, prevention, exercise, everybody's safer there, the consumer and the provider. Hopefully commit to is that on our advisory boards and on our citizen advisory boards that you provide greater oversight or transparency so that everyone can participate. And we need to just work
Good evening. My name is Warren Redmond. I'm actually a citizen of Lindsborg, but I attend church in Salina. My wife works at Salina Regional Healthcare Center, so we spend a lot of time in Salina. And I heard the police chief, Chief Nelson, refer to Ferguson, where we're actually natives of St. Louis, Missouri, Ferguson, Florissant district. And having experienced turmoil with the police or with law enforcement, bear with me. I got you and your officers were scared of being hurt, but you had to do a job. And so I asked, you and the board and those our taxpayers, officers who are afraid of being hurt, or a police chief who's afraid of being hurt by what I found out tonight, $10 million of resources, those are out in day-to-day action. So that was one thing that I just wanted to throw out there for consideration. Also, I wanted to know if you, as the chief of police, were familiar with the Stanford prison experiment, in which there was an experiment held at the University of Stanford, California. I can't remember the year, but I would just say that is worth looking into for you and your officers to just show the mentality of those in authority. So the Stanford prison experiment is something that I did want to do. Or programs are in training, what type of trainings are they doing to ensure that they are prepared to deal with citizens who they have no connection with. Some grow up in poverty, some grow up not in poverty, central Kansas or in the state of Kansas. And so in ensuring trust, I have another question. I attended the George Floyd vigil here that happened maybe a month or so ago, in which one thing I spoke to my wife about was that I did not see any law enforcement there, and I did not attend the protest or the walk the following day. But then again, there were members from my church, including my bishop, Pastor Stephen Davison, and his family, who attended, but did not recognize any law enforcement in attendance. And so in trying to, as the last, assure trust and to come together, what things are being done to who are underrepresented for the defunding the police? Again, I'm not for it one way or the other, but I would like to know what type of things, if defunding the police is something that's being spoke about, what are we doing with, how do we reallocate those funds into the community? Because I worked which is probably one of the lower income in Salina, and the thing that I noticed, there wasn't a lot of initiative or activity for those families, for those students to be a part of outside of illegal activity. So that was my time, and that's just what I wanted to leave the board and the police chief with.
There was a lot said there, and it's I was trying to write down some of the questions that I wrote down. As far as, I don't believe what I said about being injured. What I said is we accept that we could be injured. We accept that we could be injured, and we know that going into the job. So I'm not saying we sit around and worry about being injured, because if that was the case, when I made reference to that, we wouldn't leave the police station. Do I want to be injured? No. Do I want a particular order here? But I keep on hearing the $10 million. That is in Salina. But folks, you have to realize that 93% of that $10 million is for salary and benefits. So defund the police doesn't mean get rid of dollars, is what it is. It's a little bit less than that. So the 10 officers, if we were full, and we have 30 or 31 civilian. So the majority of that goes towards salary and benefits. I want the gentleman though that brought this up, is a prison study you were talking about, is that where the students, or the college students became prison guards, and they were acting like, yeah, that's several years ago. That is very interesting. Basically, these college students became prison guards and wore everything like they were prison guards, and over a matter of time, they started treating the prisoners extremely poorly, when a day before that, they were your average college student. So that is I don't know what the name of the study is, but I have read that. That's horrible as far as if given authority and power, and over a period of time they evolve into that. That's horrendous. But that's probably over a decade ago. But that, thank you, sir. Staying fast since day one. I think every police chief does. We've had a lot of initiatives where we're trying to get out there with the community, and I'm talking about our Bigs and Blue program we are definitely trying to do what police departments, once the vehicle became part of the police department's arsenal, for lack of a better term, and once the cops got in cars, all of a sudden you lose the neighborhood cop, you lose the cop walking around. Now you have what's been termed drive-by policing, where we're in our car, we drive by and wave at you. And we are truly trying to get out of our cars and talk to people, to build trust. That's my philosophy, and that's what I've said many, many times.
Right, and I would add, we've had those conversations, and we also have to balance that with the staffing challenges that we've had. In our retention, I think that creates an opportunity for the community-based police, but there are issues well beyond just the police department, and that's a dialogue that I don't know has been strong and consistent in the community, so we'll be able to participate in that. So that's something that conversations, the topics that we've identified just from prior conversations exceed what we can talk about tonight, but then mental health and income and equity type.
Well,
James Bowden, Salina, Kansas. As a white person, I'm not afraid to call the police. I've called them for many reasons, including very serious ones that could have resulted in the end of my life. I trust that when I call for help, they will be there to protect me and the people I care about. The problem is, that is my privilege as a middle-class white American. We wouldn't be here tonight. This is not the case for people of color in America. We've seen that anything can trigger an officer to willingly put someone's life in danger using the tactics that they were trained to use, regardless of whether the detained person poses an imminent threat to their life. Until the standard of Caucasian male can feel equally assured that when they're going to interact with an officer of the law, that they will be respected and treated like the human beings that we all are, we have a duty to continually scrutinize the actions of the police and the policies of our cities, whether it's on our doorsteps or 1,000 miles away. We have an opportunity right now to take a serious look at our entire law enforcement system and ask ourselves, where is there room for improvement? This is our duty as citizens of this community to ensure that we protect everyone, to ensure all lives matter, right? But until we recognize that Black lives matter, Latino lives matter, LGBTQ lives matter, protesters' lives matter, and make policy changes that ensure their lives matter, all lives matter is only a dog whistle to white America. My solution for these issues is to listen to these people here tonight, the young people especially, to take them seriously and implement the changes they are proposing. By failing to do so, our community will remain in a state of ignorance and complacency, while the rest of America will be thinking critically about how to change the system for the better. We will be faced with these issues in the future, so let's take the time to prepare now in order to navigate them fairly and as white people.
I want to say thank you to all the participants that had questions or comments. But I want to leave you with this, since I'm the moderator, and I think I can have like 180 to say something. I've heard of police, and he doesn't feel intimidated. This is not anti-police, believe you me. But I want to take you back somewhere that happened back in 1863 when the abolishment of slavery took place. And during that time, obviously, there were laws that were made that free slaves, if they were laundering, if they didn't have places to live, these individuals were put in jail. And during this time, there were many police officers that were hired to do this. And sometimes we ask the question, where does the distrust come, especially for African Americans? But once that took place, black people in general, when they saw the police, that meant either I'm going to jail or I may lose my life. And over times and generations, those things still stuck with, because that is the stories that our grandparents and great-grandparents told us. During this particular time as well, obviously there were laws, the Black Code, or the Jim Crow, that when these individuals were caught or when they were committed a crime, and if you read the 13th Amendment, it talks about slavery being abolished, is just paraphrasing, abolished unless there was a crime committed. But during the time these people committed crimes and they could not pay the fines, they were put in jail, they were put in prison. And during this time, they were leased out to the plantation owners, whether it was from the county or whether it was from the state. And the county and the state was making money off of this. So the thing that have the distrust or between African Americans and officers, whether they're black or white officers, the thing of it is that it stems from years ago. And I believe until we can have the hard conversations, difficult conversations, it's what we can do as individuals. It's not at the feet of just one individual or one sector of people, but it's at the feet of us as a whole. And when we look at that as individuals, and when we look at how we can do better, 50 years ago, my father had this conversation with me. 50 years ago, he said, son, it's going to get better. I have a granddaughter that's 7 years old today, right now, actually. In 50 years, I do not want her to have to be sat in the audience or on the podium having this same discussion as what we can do better. I believe as an individual, as a proud American, as a Desert Storm vet, as one who fought, as one who had uncles and great uncles that fought for this country, I believe that change starts with the person in the mirror. We have to see ourselves different. I have served as a chaplain. I rode with many, the chief about this today. I rode with many. We had really open conversations that I would not divulge because it was a conversation that they had, I had with those individuals. But what I'm saying today is that, and I hope you didn't think you was going to get away with at least one scripture from the Bible. Out of Jeremiah, the 29th chapter, in the 11th verse, the Bible says, for I know the thoughts that I think toward you, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end. I believe each of us that is in this building, I think I counted 119 people, maybe off a little bit. But for each individual that is here, I think we want better for our children than we experience. And the only way that we're going to have better for our children than we experience, we have to evaluate ourselves, see what the issue is, and not be afraid to say, I was wrong. Not be afraid to say, wow, we can do something different. So, as a whole, I think as a whole and Salina, I think we have a very good community. But if we want to be better, it changes with the man or the woman in the mirror. So, again, thank you all. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mike, for allowing me to moderate this. Thank you to the commissioners for the opportunity. But I think that we have to go deeper. And there were phenomenal questions asked tonight. There was phenomenal statements. But I think we have to go deeper in order for my granddaughter at age 57 not to be dealing with these same questions that my father talked to me about 50 years ago.
the 5 of us do not have all the answers. We will be soliciting more public comment. I think the words of wisdom from Bishop Stephen Davison prove that we need individuals like him involved in these conversations. We again thank you, Bishop Davison, for your time, for your leadership here tonight, and also for your words of wisdom. Also, I'd like to thank Matt Thompson and Kansas to use this facility. Gave us the chance to social distance a little bit and to we will probably, I'm guessing, have at least one more session, and we will, as a commission, begin to start to massage this information and see how we move forward. With that, I believe we are done for this evening. I do need a motion for adjournment.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?